So as you continue to plan how you're going to start with your pinhole cameras to create some exposures, I wanted to do another quick video to just give you a few extra little tips, things that over the last couple of 6 months or so that I've been working with pinhole, things that I've learned, and things that I think that you'll find helpful as you begin this magical journey. We talked about in my other video, and I want to re-emphasize that your exposed paper will still look white. So that's, definitely don't think something is going wrong if you don't see the image on the paper. Everything is normal. Wind, even subtle wind, is very problematic for these cameras. They are virtually weightless, and so, and it's windy here in this area as a general rule, and even on days when it doesn't seem windy, be ready to be frustrated because wind comes out of nowhere and it affects these cameras a lot. So just be aware that wind is something that you are constantly going to battle. But something else that you're going to constantly battle is what is called a light leak. And a light leak is when you've got extra light that's coming into the camera that is not coming through the pinhole. It's very hard to prevent that from happening all around because we are using cameras that are made out of a cardboard box. So there is going to be some degree of light leakage. One of the most effective techniques that I have been using for protecting against light leaks is that fabric-y band that you should have built with your camera in class that wraps around your camera and velcros together. I know it seems simple, and it actually doesn't really fit that tight. So you would think that it's not really contributing much. But it's actually amazingly effective at keeping the light from entering. The biggest place where light leaks in our cameras is that tray at the back of the camera. And so what that wrapper does around the outside of the camera is it puts like a really long shade on that hole around the tray, and it's extremely effective. So use those light belts as you're doing your exposures, and you'll find that you get many fewer light leaks. Also, have a towel handy. I had just and it doesn't have to be a special towel. I mean, it could be just a kitchen dish towel. What I would do as I was carrying the camera around is, even as it was in its light belt, I would have it in my hand and I would drape the kitchen towel over the camera so that as I was carrying the camera around ready to get it in position, it wasn't like accidentally exposing things as I'm just walking around with the camera trying to get it in position. And I would set the camera down on the ground with the kitchen towel over it and kind of get it into rough position. Then I would remove the kitchen towel, fine-tune my positioning, and then open the shutter, make the shot. When the shot was over, I would actually put the kitchen towel back over, because as you go to touch your camera to close the shutter, you're going to shake it a little bit. And although it doesn't affect these cameras like it would some other ones, because we are already talking about very long exposures. So some degree of camera movement's not a huge deal. But use the kitchen towel. Throw the kitchen towel over. That kind of immediately seizes the exposure, stops the light from entering to a degree. I mean, the kitchen towel is by no means light tight, but it does cut it from like 100% down to like 0.001, and that's significant. So then you just throw that over. It immediately arrests the exposure. Then stick your hand up underneath of the kitchen towel and go ahead and shut the shutter. And that way, if you do shake the camera a lot as you put the shutter down after making an exposure, it's no big deal because there's not a lot of light coming in, just a fraction of 1% coming in through the towel itself. So the towel is pretty much your exposure arrestor. And then you stick your hand up under the thing and push the shutter closed. And that is how you can avoid those last second bumps of the camera where as you're closing the shutter you actually wind up turning the camera a little bit, because they will affect your image quality. It's not a ton, but it is an effect on image quality. So by using a towel, towel goes over, that silences the exposure, stick your hand up under. Now you can shake the camera, do whatever you want. I mean, as you're closing it, because the light coming in is like, it's pretty much zero. So then just go ahead and close the shutter. Now it is zero, and you're good to go. Now you got the camera covered in the towel. Just carry the towel right back into your house. Go right to your interior room. Drop the towel. Undo the belt. Change your film, and you're good to go. I talked a bit about it is really difficult to work on location. So for these first couple projects, you'll definitely just want to work from an interior room of your house. Immediately record information about your exposure in your log. If you team up and you work with somebody, this can be very helpful to designate that person as the log keeper. So that person can just write down the exposure number, what was it a picture of, how long the exposure was, and so on and so forth, so that if something works well, you'll know what works well, and if it doesn't work well, you'll know what to try for next time. You could also consider taking a reference image, which would be the Pinhole camera in action. So you take a picture with your phone or a real camera of your Pinhole camera from behind, right? You don't want to walk in front of your own camera. You will make a shadow in the exposure. But you could take a picture of it from behind, maybe even from the same vantage point, so that you see the camera down in the corner of the frame and you get an idea of what your phone sees. Then you can compare it to the exposure you made after the fact and get a better feeling for how you aim your camera, because you can look at what your phone saw from that angle and then compare it to what did your Pinhole camera see from that angle. And then you can get to know your camera's little nuances, such as, mine tends to grab a lot of foreground. So I know this, and so I can compensate by, I have to tilt my box up quite a bit more than would seem natural, because for whatever reason, mine likes to grab foreground. So I have to minimize that foreground if I want to get it. But the reference images can help you by taking a picture of the camera in action from behind, from the similar perspective, point of view, so that you get a comparison, and you can learn and fine-tune your photography. Some other things, don't try to photograph things at close range. This is not a macro type camera. It will not really, it's not going to focus incredibly well. And so because of that, you'll be disappointed if you try taking pictures of things at close range. Also, it's very difficult, especially the first couple times you use the camera, to actually tell what you're getting in a picture. So if you get too close to something, there's a good chance that it's going to be only partially in the frame. Okay. some interesting things to photograph with a pinhole camera are old things. You know, it gives a sense of time. It gives a sense of authenticity. The battlefield pictures that I did are really neat. This picture here is a picture of my house, which is 115 years old. You know, it's kind of neat. Old things are kind of neat to photograph with this type of technology. What else is cool? Architecture. Architecture doesn't move, and so it makes a great subject for this type of photography. New things produce a very an ironic type of look when you photograph it with such an old technology. So if you had a picture of a 2017 automobile taken with this type of technology, that gives it a kind of neat look because, you know, this is the old looking film, but it's a new object. So new things can be kind of neat to do with this. Still lifes can be very interesting. Again, they will have challenges. You'll have challenges of, you know, don't get too close to it, but that being said, the camera is also much more wide angle than you would expect it to be at a 100 millimeter focal length. So you could try still lifes, but if you do a still life, do it outside, because if you do it inside, you will be prepared for 15 minutes or longer for an exposure, and that gets to just be challenging in its own right. So old things, new things, architecture, still life. These are all things, and you know, just random objects that you find create very interesting scenes when you look at them through a pinhole. Even things like a view down a sidewalk become, you know, from the ground level. You know, a lot of things look neat from ground level when you photograph them through a pinhole. So get creative. There's some ideas for you as far as where to start, but you know, hopefully these extra tips are also helpful to you as you begin your journey